everyone. Good evening. It's pretty late in the night to be starting critical reasoning, but here I am, and there you are, all ready to learn about critical reasoning. So, as the term denotes critical reasoning, it's very, very critical to understand it. Now, you all must have heard about CLAT changing their question pattern, bringing in new things. So essentially what's happening is all the legal exams, their focus is on now to check whether the student has the ability to critically analyze something that's written down as a piece of prose, to understand what a particular passage or a particular question means. And at the end of it, if you start looking at how lawyers behave, what are they essentially talking about? All lawyers are out to convince that they are giving the best argument and the judge should give a judgment in their favor or in the favor of their client. So when you're looking at any argument or any piece of prose, they're trying to see whether you have the ability to look for flaws in it, whether you have the ability to read a particular paragraph and say, hey, I think I can make this stronger. I don't think the point is coming out very clearly. Or whether you have the ability to say, I think there's something left unsaid over here to prove the conclusion that the author is coming to. If the author had given me, some more information in this regard, then I would have probably been able to give a better answer or make the conclusion a little more stronger. So these are the areas that they really check when they're looking at your CLAT. So this is what you really have to focus on all the time. So if you have that clarity and your focus is absolutely clear, and you're able to think rationally, think on your feet, think smartly, analyze information, then you're all set to go for a career in law. So let's start looking at what critical reasoning is. But before I move there, let me tell you a little bit about the changes that have come in. So the English section has about 28 to 32 questions, which will be grammar and sentence correction and stuff like that. But apart from that, you have logical reasoning, which will again have another 20% of the question paper, 28 to 32 questions, which means that you have to really prepare for it well. So it's a very, very important area that you have to hone your skills in. And when you start looking at other areas, legal aptitude and all the other areas related to CLAT or related to law, the other questions also carry enough of this analytical thinking that this class of critical reasoning helps you build. Okay, so let's start. So your mind is thinking, and as the first picture shows, these are jigsaw puzzles that you're putting in place. And when you find the right connection, it's that aha moment that you'll come to, right? So let's see what exactly do I have to study. So the first thing that you have to understand is something called an argument. Now, argument is not a ladai. Most students your age tend to think of an argument, oh, I was arguing with so-and-so, that means I was fighting with so-and-so. No, that's not true. An argument is when you make a point and you give a lot of different smaller sub-points to prove that point or that stand that you have taken. For example, you're having a discussion, okay? And let's say we start discussing about a particular movie. So let's say we're talking of Jab We Met. Some of you feel that you like that movie, it was really nice. Some of you feel, no, the acting wasn't so great or the story wasn't so great. Now you will argue from your perspective, trying to prove that yes, it was a great story, or no, it was not a great story, or it was a good movie, or no, it was not a good movie. So that is what an argument is, okay? So essentially, in your exams, what sort of an argument will come? Let's see, it has three things. Three elements, sometimes it can be broken into four. I've put all the four down. Nonetheless, they're similar. The first one is called a premise. Now, a premise is information that is already given, any fact which is always considered to be true. So just to give you an example, Aryan ate a huge breakfast today. Today is a Monday. Tomorrow I'm going for a class. I don't have any classes this week. This is all basic information and they're taken at face value. They're considered to be facts. So in a structured argument, we call them premises. What do we call them? Premises, all right? The next thing is something called an assumption. An assumption is nothing but a non-given premise. So remember, I told you in the beginning that maybe the argument is giving a conclusion, but I think there's some information missing from that conclusion. So to give you an example, if I say the sun is shining brightly, so it is not likely to rain today. What is that missing link? That missing link may be that there are no clouds in the sky, or when the sun shines, rain does not come. So there is a hidden nuance that is there. Let me give you an easier one. If I say there are dark clouds in the sky, so it's likely to rain, right? Now, what are we assuming? That dark clouds must always bring rain, because I am not saying there are dark clouds in the sky, there's going to be a nuclear blast, or there are dark clouds in the sky, there's going to be a COVID endemic. I'm not saying there are dark clouds in the sky and there's going to be probably a hailstorm. I'm saying there are dark clouds in the sky, it's likely to rain. So that means dark clouds must bring rain. So assumption is nothing but a non-given premise or a non-given conclusion, statement, right? Then you come to something called a conclusion. Conclusion is always a result of given premises. So for example, if you look at the example that I just gave you, there are dark clouds in the sky. Dark clouds always bring rain. Now you could have reached that conclusion that it's likely to rain, right? So she studies hard and comes first in the class, so she's likely to top in the exams. A very, very clear outcome of the first sentence. So conclusion is just a result. But sometimes that conclusion is not given. And the question paper setter may ask you to find out what that conclusion is. In that case, he will call it an inference. What can you infer from the given premises or information? So heavy rains cause waterlogging in Delhi. It is raining heavily all last night in Delhi, or it was raining heavily all last night in Delhi. So what are we going to say? There is likely to be waterlogging in Delhi. So very, very simply understood, conclusions, premises, assumptions, and inferences as an entire set that makes a whole argument, right? So if I quickly recap, a premise is a given information. An assumption is an information that is missing or a premise that's missing, but it will help me reach that conclusion. A conclusion is a result. And what was the last one? An inference. An inference is a non-given result. So we figured this one out. Let's go to the next one. One has to run 4 kilometers and walk 7 kilometers carrying 10 kgs weight in a total time of 65 minutes to qualify for an NDA admission test. Hence, Arjun could not qualify for the NDA admission test. And by the way, it's compulsory for joining the armed forces. So the premise is very clear. One has to run 4 kilometers and walk 7 kilometers carrying a 10 kgs weight in a total of 65 minutes. That's the given information. Now, if I ask you, what do you think is the conclusion? The conclusion will obviously be, hence Arjun could not qualify for the NDA entrance test. Then let me ask you, what do you think we are assuming? We are assuming that Arjun could not run. He obviously could not finish the 4 kilometers run, the 7 kilometers walk with a 10 kgs backpack, and therefore he could not qualify for the test. But can we infer something from this? We can infer that if it was compulsory for joining the armed forces, he could not join the armed forces. So this is how you will break an argument into its various segments. And once you're able to break that argument into its various segments, you can always find out what is the missing part. So we will try some questions and then see if we are able to handle those, right? So I'm starting with an easier level of difficulty and we'll move on to a slightly more difficult level. So let's do assumption questions. That means one premise will be given, the conclusion will be given in the paragraph, but one of the premises will not be given. So when you're solving any of these questions, always go with the assumption that we follow a mathematical pattern. Premise 1 plus premise 2 is equal to conclusion. All right. If one of my premises turns out to be an X, we are solving for an assumption. Okay? If my conclusion turns out to be an X, we are solving for either a conclusion or an inference. So here we are solving assumption questions. That means we are solving for the missing premise. So in the paragraph, I will find one premise given and I will find my conclusion given. So I have to find the missing premise. So I'm going to read it slowly with you and we will try and find out what's missing here, right? Africa's coastline. So he's asking, what's Africa's coastline? Great beaches, really, really lovely beaches, but terrible natural harbors. Rivers, amazing rivers, but most of them are rubbish for actually transporting anything. Rivers normally carry stuff, so can't carry anything. Given that every few miles you go over a waterfall. There are just two in a long list of problems which help explain why Africa isn't technologically or politically as successful as Western Europe or Northern America. So when we start looking at trying to break this in our minds, he's telling us that Africa has great beaches, but terrible harbors. Africa has amazing rivers, but most of them cannot actually carry anything, right? Because they're waterfalls. And these are just two in the long list of problems which help explain why Africa isn't technologically or politically as successful as Western Europe or Northern America. So my conclusion is that Africa is not technologically or politically successful. And the given information is that its beaches are terrible and its rivers are rubbish. They can't help. Okay. So now, which other of these options helps to prove that therefore Africa isn't technologically or politically as successful in Western Europe? So the best way to solve is after each of these, you say therefore and repeat the conclusion. Whichever makes sense will be the correct answer. So the beauty of a place's geographical features like beaches and rivers is inversely proportional to its practical value. Therefore, Africa isn't technologically or politically as successful as Western Europe or North America. Now, that doesn't make sense because if he's saying every place's geographical features are opposite to their benefit, then even Western Europe and North America have pretty beaches and very nice rivers. So even those should not be doing any work. So this one, he's generalizing about all places. So this is a generalization. So probably not my answer. Let's look at the next one. Western Europe and North America do not have as many lovely beaches and waterfalls as Africa. If they don't have as many beaches and waterfalls, then probably it's not going to be a good idea to say that Western Europe has better beaches or Western Europe is technologically or politically more successful. So this one is actually falsifying the argument. Natural harbors and rivers that aid transportation are two important ingredients in making a place technologically and politically successful. That's why Africa isn't technologically and politically successful as Western Europe or North America. This does seem to be a possible answer, but let me quickly check D. Asia is more successful than Africa. I don't even need to read this further because we weren't talking of Asia at all. So I found my right answer because this is saying you may have natural harbors and rivers, but if they do not aid transportation, then they are not good to have. And Africa's were not aiding transportation. Therefore, Western Europe and North America were technologically and politically far more successful than Africa. So you've got the hang of how to do an assumption question, right? So let's try a hand at the next one. Now, in this one, you've got to read it on your own. I'm going to keep shut for 2 minutes and then we're going to solve it. So, finished? Now, the first thing to find is which is the conclusion over here. Now, if you can't figure out a conclusion, should the conclusion be the first sentence, the second sentence, or the third sentence? Try and put a therefore in front of it. Therefore, consumer groups tend to criticize credit card companies as the interest rates charged by them are very high. Doesn't make any sense. And you can't put therefore and but together, so the next sentence can't be anyway a conclusion. Let's look at the last one. Therefore, you can buy things wherever you want to, even when you do not have enough cash in your pocket. Yeah, this looks like a conclusion, right? And he's saying consumer groups overlook the fact that credit cards afford great flexibility. So this is the premise information that credit cards are good. They give you a lot of flexibility, and therefore you can buy things wherever you want, even if you're not carrying cash. Now, which of these options helps to prove that yes, credit cards indeed allow you to buy things wherever you want, even if you don't have cash? So the cost saving of buying an item at a reduced price is equal to the excess interest that a consumer pays. He's talking about savings. I'm not talking about savings. I need to figure out where can I actually use the card and buy things when I'm not carrying cash. So this one's talking something else. All shops accept payment by credit card. Therefore, I can buy things even if I don't have cash. Makes sense. A credit card holder is tempted to buy things when he does not really require. Therefore, he can buy things when he doesn't have cash. Also makes sense. I'll hang on to this. One is more careful while making payments in cash rather than credit card. Therefore, you can buy things wherever you want. That doesn't make sense. Now, between these two, I have to find one that tells me it is more flexible and it allows me to buy things when I don't have cash. This one is telling me of a temptation and a problem with credit cards. We've got to talk about why credit cards are indeed flexible. So the second one gives me the best answer, right? So you're beginning to get the grasp of when a conclusion is given and there is certain information missing, how to start finding that missing information, right? Let's move on to the next question. Burgerland, now all of you probably eat from Burger King. So Burgerland, a nationwide fast food chain, recently announced a special promotion dramatically reducing the price of its most popular burger, the Big and Beefy. So it must be like Juicy Lucy burger, right? This development has provoked a strong response by the nation's nutritionists, right? So they're giving Big and Beefy, nutritionists are up in arms. This is not fair. Citing the extremely high levels of cholesterol in Big and Beefy. So obviously the nutrition people are going to say, no, you're going to eat all that junk. They predict that the price reduction will have a negative impact on the health of our citizens. So basically what are they saying? That with all these high levels, because the price is reduced, it will reduce the health of people. Now, what are they assuming? Why will a price reduction of Big and Beefy reduce the health of people? Even without reading, most of you, I'm sure, are able to guess, but log khayenge na? Obviously, they will eat if the price has gone down. So, you know, when Burger King and others give you 2 burgers for the price of 1, everyone goes for it, irrespective of cholesterol and calories. So, let's start looking at the answers. Some consumers induced by the price reduction to purchase the Big and Beefy would otherwise have consumed food lower in cholesterol than Big and Beefy. That means some consumers, because they're getting this price reduction, will buy Big and Beefy, whereas if the price was not reduced, they would probably buy something better. So this is in sync with what we thought may be a right answer. Reducing fat consumption is the most important factor in improving one's diet. Therefore, price reduction will have a negative impact on the health of our citizens. That doesn't make any sense, right? I've got to talk about how Big and Beefy will be more in demand and therefore it'll be bad for health. Burgerland could not have increased sales of Big and Beefy by reducing its cholesterol content and appealing to health-conscious consumers. Maybe it could have, maybe it would not have been very tasty if they did that, but we don't know. This is taking you outside the argument of the paragraph. The last option says, other fast food companies will not respond to Burgerland's announcement by reducing the price of their own high cholesterol burgers. So if others don't reduce their price, then everyone will come to Burgerland and buy their burger. And if they buy their burger, then their burger is going to cause cholesterol problems and therefore bad health. So this one continues to be the one that supports, because this one, while others may not reduce their prices, or even if they did reduce their prices, does not say that it will still be consumed. So let's assume for a minute that Burger Land has introduced a new burger and they've given it at a very cheap price. Now, other companies also introduce a similar burger and they also reduce their price, right? But if people don't like that burger, they're neither going to buy it from Burgerland nor are they going to buy it from others. The fact is that people have to buy it and eat it for it to impact the health. So this one was talking about the fact that they would consume the food. The others were not talking about eating it. They were only talking about दूसरे भी price कम कर देंगे, पर खरीदेंगे कि नहीं कोई वो नहीं बताया. Got it? So clever way of catching a student. So we're going to do one more question of assumptions and then we'll move on to looking at conclusions. During the production of orange juice, calcium is sometimes added as a nutritional supplement, right? Many times you buy orange juice, it says fortified with calcium. Certain individuals are allergic to calcium and drink orange juice fortified with calcium, and drinking this juice can cause an allergic reaction, right? They may get very bad allergy. Fortunately, some types of orange juice do not have calcium added during production. So they give a natural juice. So calcium allergic individuals can drink these orange juices without inducing an allergic reaction to calcium. So he's saying, therefore, those who are allergic can drink orange juice which does not have calcium added to it, so they don't have this reaction. So what is the person assuming? That how can they have the normal orange juice without getting that reaction? There are no other substances beside calcium that are typically present in orange juice that cause allergic reactions. No, we're only talking about reaction to calcium. We're not talking about reaction to other things in a juice. So if somebody has a calcium reaction, then we only have to look at reacting to that. If their allergy is caused by other things, then the argument is going outside of the box. So I'm not looking at other allergic reactions, right? Orange juice has the same nutritional value whether calcium is added to it or not. My question wasn't about how much nutritional value. My question was, should we add calcium when others are getting allergic reaction? Calcium allergic individuals cannot ingest any calcium without having an allergic reaction. Well, that we know. That's why they want to take away the calcium from it. Orange juice that does not have calcium added during production, calcium is not naturally present in quantities that cause an allergic reaction. Now, this is the right answer, but let's see why. They are saying in natural orange juice, where we are not adding extra calcium, there may still be calcium because orange juice may have calcium, may have vitamin C, may have several things. But the natural calcium is not of that higher quantity that a person may get an allergic reaction. Therefore, a person can drink a natural orange juice without extra calcium added and get no allergic reaction. Now I understand, and this seems to be a fine logic. So as you progress, you realize that questions can get tougher. I am required to think very deeply about the answer before I jump to that answer conclusion, right? Let's do one, and this one is supposed to be comparatively tougher because, the degree keeps going higher and higher. A month ago, the jail warden declared that in order that the physical stress levels of the inmates be reduced, all inmates will be moved to some sedentary jobs for 2 hours. Sedentary is ordinary jobs where you have to sit down, right? So they're saying physical stress levels are too high, so we will give them some sedentary job to do for 2 hours. However, no such change ever took place. They weren't given those jobs. When questioned, the warden replied that a new high priority project requiring massive physical work was commissioned, forcing him to postpone the earlier plans. So that means some big work is coming, which will have a lot of physical labor. So I cannot give them that sedentary job for 2 hours. But all inmates are still working in the same routine as last month. That means neither did they get sedentary jobs, nor did they get this physical work that was being commissioned. Therefore, the warden is lying. Now, clearly, this is my conclusion. The warden is lying. That means I have to prove that the warden is definitely lying because he did not get extra work and the people are still doing what they were doing a month ago. So let's see, how do we prove that the warden is lying? Every inmate is physically capable to work on the new project. He may be capable, but that doesn't tell me the warden is telling the truth or lying. Sedentary work planned earlier is not as important as the new project. Okay, so it's not as important, but where is the work? Warden said there will be work, so there is still no work, and neither has the new project started. The warden could arrange for both the new project and the sedentary work without making changes to the inmate's old routine. Very good. If he can make that arrangement, then has he done that or not? I don't know whether he's made the arrangement or not, because they are saying the warden is lying. Then they would not say the warden is lying. Then they would say the warden was telling the truth, that he's managed to do that. The inmate cannot continue the old routine if the new project is underway, right? That means they cannot carry on with what they were doing a month ago, that same old routine, if the new project has been started. So if they are still working in the same routine, that means the new project has not started. And therefore, the warden is lying that he is going to get some new work that has to be done. So this proves very clearly that the warden is indeed lying, right? So I hope you've got a flavor of the assumption questions, because I'm now moving on to conclusion questions. So conclusion and inference more or less work out to be the same things. So let's try and see, can we answer these? Now, what's happening in these questions? In these questions, you have premise 1 and premise 2 given, but you have to solve for X, which is your conclusion. So let's see what information is coming through these. There is a general belief that greater number of hours spent at the workstation, the greater is the efficiency of the employee. That means the longer he works at his desk, the better is his efficiency. That's a belief, given that all employees are equally skilled. Companies are now skeptical of this practice. Skeptical means they doubt it, that it's not true, right? So companies don't think that's really true. Smart working requires putting in minimum effort in minimum time to derive the maximum output. That means spend less time at your workstation, but give far more than you would have, right? So which of the following can be inferred? So if smart working means putting in less effort, less time, but more output, then so let's start putting a therefore in front of each, because we're looking at a conclusion. Therefore, maximum time spent at work leads to best results. No, this he's saying minimum time. So this is wrong. Therefore, too much work puts an unnecessary load on the employees. No, he said minimum effort. So it's not too much effort. Therefore, the additional time that is allotted for work can be better utilized for business meetings. Where is this coming from? We're talking about workers, we're not talking about management. Therefore, companies may push employees into getting more results in less time. More results in less time. More results is equal to more output, right? Which was given here, maximum output in less time. So I get my conclusion. So the conclusion is literally just a nichod. You know, you squeeze an orange and what you get? So it's a deduction. So what do you deduce from it is what can you derive out of the paragraph given. So let's try another one. All right. So a journalist is speaking. He says, obviously, though some animals are purely carnivorous, none would survive without plants. So though animals eat animals, they won't survive without plants. But the dependence is mutual. Many plant species would never have come to be had there been no animals to pollinate, fertilize, and broadcast their seeds. So that means plants also need animals. Also, plants' synthetic activity would deplete the carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere were it not constantly being replenished by the exhalation of animals, engine fumes, smokes from fires, many set by human beings, right? So what are they saying? Photosynthesis, I'm sure you all studied in your 8th and ninth class biology. Plants absorb carbon dioxide and throw out oxygen, right? So they're saying if only plants were there, they would be just absorbing the carbon dioxide and eventually there'll be no carbon dioxide left and then the plants would die. So plants also need animals. They need them to pollinate, fertilize, spread their seeds, and for photosynthesis. So which one of the following shows the conclusion? Therefore, the photosynthetic activity of plants is necessary for animal life, but animal life is also necessary for the occurrence of photosynthesis in plants. Maybe I will put a question mark and a tick here. He hasn't spoken about this part, that photosynthesis is important for animals. He's spoken about how animal life is important for this one. I don't know, but this one is definitely correct, right? Let's go to the next one. Some purely carnivorous animals would not survive without plants. ये तो लिखा ही हुआ है. I have to come to a conclusion, right? So this doesn't help. The chemical composition of Earth and its atmosphere depends, at least to some extent, on the existence and activities of animals that populate the Earth. Whatever happened to plants? He hasn't even spoken about plants here. Just as animals are dependent on plants for survival, plants are dependent on animals for theirs. Now here, animals are dependent on plants for survival and plants are dependent on animals for theirs. Here, both parts are correct, whereas here, this part was not correct or not spoken of. So the minute I found a better answer, I will discard A and D becomes my correct answer. So conclusion questions turn out to be fairly easy if you understand the paragraph. All right, now this one is really easy. I'm sure all of you would be able to give me the right answer. Let's see. Children of alcoholics are much more likely to become alcoholics than are children of non-alcoholics. Okay, the likelihood varies depending on which parent is alcoholic. Is it the mother or the father? So the likelihood of their becoming alcoholic varies depending on which parent is alcoholic and is much greater if both are alcoholic. This pattern holds true even if children are separated from their alcoholic parents at birth. That means after the child is born, even if the child no longer lives with those alcoholic parents, given up for adoption or something, the child may still become alcoholic. So what conclusion can I come to? Must be there in their genes, right? Children of non-alcoholics do not become alcoholics. We don't know that because the author hasn't given us any information regarding non-alcoholics. Fathers influence their children's alcoholic tendencies more than mothers do. I don't know because they just said parent. They did not say male parent or female parent. So I can't say this one for sure. A tendency towards alcoholism can be at least partially determined by genetics. Yeah, partially determined by genetics. This is what I was looking for. It must be in their genes. So maybe my right answer. Environment has little influence on alcoholism. He hasn't spoken about environment at all. So found my answer. Told you this was an easy one. Okay, let me just give you a sample of, yeah, this is a good question. I'll do this and then I'll try and give you one more of a different kind. In 2010, China comprised about 10% of the world's GDP, and its voting share in the World Bank was increased from 3% to 4.4%, right? So when their GDP was 10%, their share increased from 3%, it rose to 4.4%. right? All right. During the same time frame, France comprised about 4% of the world's GDP. So this was China. This is France. And saw its voting share at World Bank drop from 4.3%. It went down to 3.8%. Okay. Which of the following can be logically concluded? Therefore, remember, put therefore in front of each option. Therefore, World Bank voting shares are allocated based upon each country's share of the world's GDP. Maybe. Okay. Therefore, the new ratio of voting share of percentage of world GDP is lower for China than it is for France. Not sure. So I'll put a question mark. Haven't understood. Therefore, GDP is the most important factor in determining voting share at the World Bank. That I can't say because I don't know whether they're considering other factors or only GDP and whether it's the most important factor or not. So this one I can surely put across. Therefore, France lost some of its voting share to China because China comprises a larger portion of the world's GDP. Now, France lost some of its voting share to China. We do not know about the voting share of the rest of the world. Which countries went up, which countries went down. And we haven't been told in this that the rest of the world, everywhere it remained the same. So therefore, whether France lost its voting share to China, whether it lost it to America, whether it lost it to India, we don't know. So maybe, but it doesn't seem so right. So I've got to find an answer between these two. World Bank voting shares are allocated based upon each country's share of the world's GDP. Now, since we don't know if GDP is the only factor or other things are considered or not, therefore it becomes a little difficult to answer this. But the B one doesn't seem to make any sense. The new ratio of voting share to percentage of world GDP is lower for China than it is for France. Let's see. France has only 4% of GDP, world's GDP, and yet it has 3.8% voting share, almost 4% voting share. So the amount of GDP is turned out to be almost close to the voting share. But in case of China, which has 10% of the world's GDP, they are only getting a voting share of 4.4%, not close to 10%. So therefore, the new ratio of voting share to percentage of GDP is lower for China than it is for France. Now I understood. See what a clever question? So sometimes they give you these clever questions. And that is what you really need to understand when you're preparing for CLAT. So this is something where we teach you tricks and other things where you need to be able to identify exactly how the solution is coming. So it's not just practice, it's the strategizing how to find that answer. So once you gradually understanding all the loopholes and other kind of tricks that they put in these questions, then you start understanding how the question paper is set or how to maximize your scores. So it's very, very important to get the hang of that, because these trick questions are the ones that trouble the students the most. Okay, I want you to look at this one last bit, which is strengthening questions. Now, strengthening means that you will have your argument as it's given. You will have your normal argument, which will have its two premises and a conclusion. You have to find something that will make this conclusion stronger. Remember, if you are in a law court, you are making an argument, you want to make your argument stronger, you're going to try and put as much information as possible, which means you're going to try and find a new premise to make the conclusion stronger. So when we have P1 plus P2 is equal to conclusion, now to make it stronger, you add a P3. So that will lead to a conclusion becoming even stronger. All right? And I'm not writing the code, right? With a view to curb alcohol abuse, the state government has imposed strict laws to punish bootleggers. Bootleggers are people who sell alcohol. So to curb alcohol abuse, to curb alcohol being drunk by so many people, the state government has imposed laws to punish these people who are selling alcohol. But a newspaper is questioning the government strategy. It's saying, why are you punishing suppliers? Why not catch the alcoholics, the people who are drinking, who happen to be bigger culprits, right? Seems to be making sense that don't catch the person who's selling, catch the person who's buying and drinking. Now we've got to make the newspaper's argument stronger. That means, yes, don't catch the supplier, catch the consumer. Government in other states have done the same. That doesn't help me, and that in fact weakens the newspaper stand. You've got to see the success rate, no? Even if others are doing it, but if they're not successful, then you can't follow it. The government can use the proceeds of the sale for infrastructure improvement. They're already assuming that the government will do well and they will get money from it. And now they're saying, oh, where should you spend the money? Oh, let's use the money for infrastructure improvement. That's going way too ahead instead of saying whether this will work or not. Since the bootleggers only sell alcohol to users, containing consumption can have a better impact on ban. This seems to be the same thing, that these people only sell, but these people consume. So if you contain the consumption, then it will help more. So maybe my right answer. The consumers may try to protect their bootleggers. That doesn't help me. If they try to protect their bootleggers, then the government strategy will fail and neither the newspaper nor the state government would be right. So the correct one that is supporting the stand of the newspaper guys is this one. So the idea was just to give you a flavor of the kind of questions that can come. Now I'm ready to answer your questions. If you have any, please go ahead and ask me if you have any questions or if you've understood what goes on. Yeah? I had an interesting last page slide for you actually. So ask your questions. In the meanwhile, I'll put that up. So when you're finished, it's that yay moment when you feel I've done it all and I've done it so well, right? So any questions? You can type in your questions and I would be able to see and I'll answer you. So you can put your questions. Meanwhile, I'll show you one more question. Okay, I just wanted to show you this. This is the way that a lot of questions have now started coming. They give you a whole paragraph. And if you see, this is about a page and a half of passage, okay? And then they'll ask you 3 or 4 questions related to that paragraph. So if you've understood the concepts that you've done in the beginning, strengthening, weakening, inference, assumptions, those, then you're able to answer questions in this paragraph. Because over here, with that entire story, they'll give you inference questions, they'll give you strengthening questions, they'll give you weakening questions and all kinds. All right, anybody has any questions? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, I will assume you all understood what we were supposed to do. So good night and rest well and all the best. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.